Right.
Yo.
People rolling in. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Give folks a couple of minutes and then we will get started. So I think we have a very important discussion to start off with today.
Do we? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You guys brought it up earlier this week. I said we had to talk about it.
I don't remember
At all. Nothing. Complete blank. So let's hit.
I don't
let's
remember
have it.
things that happened earlier today. So
All right. I want to make sure I get this right. So let me roll back in our chat. We chat a lot, guys.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
We're
like rolling back
friends.
in our chat. To be honest, it takes a while.
Yeah. Here we go. How did we talk about calzones and pizza? How did pizza win out in popularity?
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were some other really important parts of the discussion too, right? So I think we could go pretty in depth if we want to.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just start there. Pizza or calzone?
I like a calzone.
Yeah.
I mean, I like pizza too, but
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, calzones are just easier to eat.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm looking at it purely from the perspective of I don't like to share food in the first place, so I don't really care what you're eating. Pizza is great if you need to buy food for a bunch of people, right? But if I'm just getting something that's delicious for myself, which is typically all I care about is me. So yeah.
I'm a pizza man myself. I'll be honest. I do enjoy a good calzone, and I like the idea that with the calzone, it's kind of like choose your own sauce adventure. You can have different dipping sauces, and you can choose how much sauce you get. I like that. But I love a big slice of pizza that I can fold in half, which I guess technically kind of makes it a calzone. So
it makes it a taco at best.
Oh yeah. I mean, sort of. Yeah. I will say the calzone may be just a little bit of the exotic for me because I've never seen a gluten-free calzone, so I've not had one in a very long time. So it just sounds better. I'm having fond memories, I guess.
Yeah.
Eric in chat, and I have started to really respect Eric's opinion because he's got a great name. He does say, "Who says you have to share a pizza?" And that's a fair point. I hadn't really considered it. I guess. Don't have to.
I like Megan, what she brought up here. Like, I've been seeing that Batman movie pizza and I want to try it. So if people have tried that, it's like a pizza and a calzone. It's a beautiful thing.
Wait,
I'd like
what?
to. Yeah,
I got Eric. I think your other namesake there maybe a problem.
Yeah.
Putting pineapple on pizza? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, we went from Batman pizza to that real quick, but the Batman pizza, if you're unaware, check it out. It's a pizza that looks like the Batman symbol, but where the head and the bottom is actually fold that into a calzone, and so you get pizza on the outside, calzone in the middle.
That's fancy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in. I'm down to try this, but I don't think it'll be like one of those limited things, like you said, right? And then it'll be like, I mean, not that I'm a huge fan of the McRib, but it'll be the McRib debate all over again, right? Someone will find something they love, and then it's gone for some time.
Yeah, I'm not even a McRib fan, but every year when they're like the McRib's back, I'm like, yes, the McRib's back, and I get one. And I'm like, this sucks. Why do I do this?
And then you're like, why did I do this to myself? Yeah. I'd like to say I blame nostalgia, but nostalgia doesn't say it's good either. It's just
Finally, though, before we move into the real stuff, we do have to settle this because this was brought up, and these are both very good points. Is a hot pocket a calzone, and is a Totino's pizza roll calzone as well?
Yes,
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Totino's pizza rolls, as I stated in our thing before, it's the mini corn dog of the calzone world, and it's fantastic. If you don't like mini corn dogs, you've got a problem too.
These are facts.
I love mini corn dogs.
I mean, you're allowed to not like them if there's some kind of other, you can't eat them for some reason. But other than that, get out of here.
Yeah, come on.
Pineapple
mini corn dog for everybody. Maybe like my wife doesn't eat pork. What do? We get all beef dogs and make delicious mini corn dogs. Maybe don't eat pork or beef. Well, guess what? There's chicken sausages now, and I bet a chicken mini corn dog would probably be good.
I mean, I know it's called a corn dog, but is there gluten in the stuff on the outside?
There is, but they're gluten-free corn dogs. They're awesome. Like, they're really good. So yeah, and mini ones too. So yeah, it's
calzone nuggets. Nice. I like that.
I like that too. Yeah, I like that. All right. Awesome. I think we probably got everybody here, and they're fully attentive at this point because that was a very engaging conversation.
And they're hungry, so sorry about that.
Pardon me. Yeah, so let's roll. First topic up, there was an article that Krebs actually put up recently, noting that hackers are gaining power subpoena via fake emergency data requests. A lot to unpack in this one, but essentially, attackers are using some social engineering techniques to gain access to like government agencies or law enforcement agency email accounts, using that email account to then target other entities like ISPs, phone companies, social media firms, and so on, to submit what they call an emergency data request to essentially get information about the customers of those ISPs, phone companies, social media firms, and so on. Yeah, what do you guys think about this one?
Scary. So, go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, it's, I guess, surprising, but not surprising, right? It's a logical step. It makes sense. I mean, you look at the way email compromise is treated in general. I think this is a variation off of kind of other things, right? Like I know, like earlier this week we're doing a red team engagement, right? And we compromise email account, and the first thing is like, well, how can we use this email account to social engineer, fish someone else internally, get them to run something, do something that because they trust the fact that it's within their own organization, right? And this is a play on trust, right? If people trust that if you have a legit, law enforcement or government email account or something like that, it's like, well, it's coming from that. I verify that it is that, so now I trust it, right? But we're not taking that extra step, right? So
yeah, it's the same thing we see in like financial fraud, ACH transactions as well, right? That email comes from a financial institution or even, from a trusted partner or entity they do business with that should be sending them that request for funding and say, oh yeah, that's my partner. I owe them money. Why would this not be legit? Right. And so they proceed with sending the funds. Let's talk about a little bit like how the EDR works too. So essentially, like there's processes in place, right, for law enforcement to be able to obtain information from those entities we talked about. There's two ways, right? The first one is you have court-ordered subpoena. And so, you have to go through that whole process to get the court-ordered subpoena. They submit the subpoena and then they respond with the records. The second is what they call an emergency cases. And what they consider an emergency case is any incident that could result in imminent harm or death, is how I understand this. And so in that case, they have like an emergency protocol that says an investigating authority, which from my understanding is law enforcement agencies and some specific government agencies, they can submit what's known as an emergency data request or an EDR and immediately pull those records. I've seen some people have like an SLA where they respond and fulfill all those within like 30 minutes, right? And so this method, there's no real official review. There's no judge overseeing it. There's no court approved documents. There's nothing. You just submit that EDR. And if you're coming from what looks like a legit source, sounds like the targets are just immediately replying with the information you're requesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not surprising, right? Like Eric said, that's happening. And I think also not surprising when you think about it, just like from the IR perspective, how many business email compromise cases we work a year, right? Email gets compromised all the time. And the government agencies aren't immune to that at all, right? I mean, if anything, I actually think they probably have more challenges than a lot of folks to, keep those things secure. So definitely not surprising on the how there either.
Yeah. And, difficult to figure out, right? I mean, how to go about that and stuff. Obviously you have there was a kind of a comment, I think in the article or one of the sub articles I read or something like that, where, it was saying, that these tech companies or ISPs or whatever are faced with a very difficult decision of honoring it quickly or potentially, or trying to figure out if it's real or not and potentially risking people's lives, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to be that guy, right? I'm sure nobody does, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. Nobody wants to end up with blood on their hands. I mean, we think about why that these targets are susceptible. It's because like they're fearful that life could be impacted, right? Or on the other side, maybe they're just fearful of not complying to that EDR process that they've agreed to and established with those agencies, right? I don't know. I think that, we were chatting about this. I think, Eric, you had a good quote. I don't remember if you want to share that, but how the system is fundamentally flawed and there's no real fix, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a comment in there from I forget the name right off the top of my head, but kind of just saying essentially that it's a fundamentally unfixable problem, right? And that and I don't know that it's necessarily true. I mean, I do think that a fundamental kind of overhaul of the way that those processes are in place, I think that is due. I think we do need to have something like that. But I mean, also at the same time, it's not impossible to call up a police department and be like, did you send me this just now? You know?
Right.
And so, I mean, I understand that there's more to it than that. And I was thinking about it more after I said it, and as we're kind of getting rolling here. And I mean, the fact is, we're not talking about just United States, right? We're talking about the entire world. There's multiple different governments and stuff that are all needing these types of things, that all have to deal with their own, emergency situations, and need to be able to get this information. And one organization, even just a team within that organization dedicated to this kind of stuff, it's still going to be difficult for them to know who to reach out to and how to verify these things. But I mean, the internet is useful, and I think there could be steps in place that still don't risk too much, but to take a few minutes, or take 5 to 10 minutes potentially, or something like that instead. But I mean, there's other questions, right? Okay, well, fine, we have a process in place to call that police department and get a hold of whoever, or whatever, that agency, and ask them if they sent this. Well, what if we don't get a hold of them? Didn't we do it right? So obviously it's tough, but I don't think it's the smart play to just look at it and be like, well, it's fundamentally unfixable, and kind of make these kind of scary comments, because that makes it sound like, well, this is just going to be a problem forever and we can't do anything about it, right? I don't believe in that either.
Yeah, and I mean, beyond just even those types of processes, right? I mean, make the initial compromise more difficult to at least knock down the number of folks this is going to happen to, kind of thing, right? And that's our basic stuff. Our MFA is our good password hygiene, all those kinds of things to make it more difficult. I understand sometimes those are challenges, right? Like we said, those are challenges in the corporate world, and probably more so even in the government world. But that's part of it too. But I agree. Let's try to do those other processes. Let's pick up the phone and call somebody, and maybe the 1% of time you can't get a hold of somebody, right? There is a fallback process or something. But I think it would eliminate a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Just following those best practices we always talk about is the best defense here. But one thing that I did find was interesting, and we understand those struggles, like you mentioned, of a lot of entities, is in the United States, we have over 18,000 entities that have the authority to request these records. So you think about that and how wide that net is for an attacker when they're trying to target individuals to compromise to use in this attack chain. That's a lot. And so, and I think it takes time to fix those things. We understand, and this is no disrespect to anyone who may be working in those agencies, but sometimes restrictions due to budgetary concerns and everything else, right? Not having dedicated security staff and so on, especially at that government level. And so we know they're going to be a little bit behind where they should be today. And, we want to help them get there. But yeah, I think modifying that process to put another point of validation, to me, seems feasible. It would have the complications like Eric mentioned, but it's a doable thing that could take some effort, but it is doable.
Yeah, at least steps. I mean, even if the rule was give them a call, try to verify. If you can't get a hold of them, go ahead and let it through. We're not worse than we are now.
Right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
doing something.
There's going to be situations where you do call and they're like, no, we don't have a situation like that, and you're able to verify that, maybe. You know what I mean? So at least, even if the fallback is let it through, we're not as bad as we are now. So I don't know. There's things we can try to work on, obviously, but I understand that it's a very complicated thing. And and to your point, you said there's like 18,000, sources that can in the United States alone that can request that stuff. And in this, in this article, I think Krebs did a great job on this article, because there's a lot of different sources talking about different things. And there's kind of an interview area with a KT from Doxman or something like that, kind of going through some stuff. Even with 18,000 and some of the stuff we already know about local governments and law enforcement and stuff, sometimes in smaller towns, especially, his statement is like, it's much more difficult, right, to get American based, or US based, I should say, government agencies compromised. And a lot of times the ones that are doing this are from other overseas countries and governments and stuff. One of the notes he said in there is that a lot of overseas governments are using WordPress for their government sites or for their law enforcement sites, etc. So I mean, it's a big issue when you take in how many sources are all worldwide. And obviously, some of the way to solve this is just to continue doing the things that we always talk about, upping your security in general, having MFA in general, one of the things that he called out about US based government agencies is that a lot of them or just sources that a lot of them have MFA. MFA is more common here, which is great to hear. Let's get it more common everywhere, right?
Yeah, one of the things I thought was neat about that part of it too is, he's talking about WordPress and he's talking about web shells and that kind of thing, right? It just kind of made me think about, how many, beyond that too, like how many proxy logon, proxy shell cases we're still seeing even now, a year plus later. And, those are shells that could be used and to send out those emails as well. And I think there was a part in one of those articles where he was talking about, the guy had shells on some places and then, kind of leverage those to get to a point where he could create new email accounts. So, it may not even be a compromised email account like we would normally see. So I thought that was kind of an interesting part of it too, that kind of ties into some of the stuff we've been seeing lately.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also too, kind of going back to the article that we covered in November of last year, I went back and checked when we talked about that. That was concerning the hoax email blast that came from the FBI Leap portal, right? So there was a flaw where essentially you could send emails from that Leap portal that appeared to be coming from FBI.gov. And so I'm sure that's very similar to what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In the article, I believe it even says that or another sub article, like I said, was talking about how the FBI was questioned about this specifically, like, hey, when the leap thing happened, did people send out EDRs on your behalf? The FBI declined to comment, but they just said they were aware of it and stuff like that. But I mean, it wouldn't be out of the question that either something like an EDR happened or similar things, right? You have those situations, you're able to send those emails, you're going to try to do things. So
yep. Yeah, and let's talk about the data too. So talk about the attack here, how they orchestrate that, but like, what are they actually getting? Right. And that, so from what I understand, they can get owners and contact information for social media accounts, right? IP addresses that were in use by a client, right? So maybe a cell phone IP or maybe a home IP they're using to access those portals. I know there was one scenario they talked about where there was a Discord request where they got the address history, right, of that Discord account that was tied to a specific phone number. So they submitted the EDR and maybe they had, Eric, like you were the target, they had Eric's phone number and they say, show me the accounts associated with this phone number and then the IP history associated with those accounts, right? And so maybe it's good to talk about like, how can that be used to further the attack? What are the next steps there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously knowing information about where someone's connected from and then geolocations and things like that, and knowing information about that can help narrow down a lot of sensitive information just about where they're at and then some of those types of things, right? Which I don't know, it's pretty wide ranging, I'd say. But
yeah, knowing location, which could be very, informative too. Even just knowing home IPs for people, right? If you're not masking those properly, and if you are a target in a significant operation, like I know Lapsus use some of the stuff in their operations, right? So you had that target, and you bang on that IP and try to find a way into that user's home network and use that to pivot further down the line. The thing they didn't call out that I was curious, and I don't know if you guys have an opinion or thoughts on this too. I didn't see anything about like the EDR providing, say if you're an ISP, actual traffic history from user, or if you're like a cell provider. I know telco has been targeted as well. Like, were they giving up text records too? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that in the article during the part where there's the kind of interview with KT from Doxman, one of the examples that they gave was that or maybe it wasn't in that section. There's multiple different things talking about these being sold on different forums and stuff like that, and EDR requests kind of as a service being sold for scary cheap when you
it's like $150. Yeah,
250 bucks or something like that. And one of the ways it was advertised, at least in one of those forum things, was that one of the ones that scares me more, and I could see it being accurate, is doing a request from Google and actually getting full chat history, email history, and files that are hosted in their Google Cloud, Google Photos, things like that, right? That's more than IP history and location data. I mean, that's a lot. There's all kinds of implications there, right? And so there's a lot of concern to what could be pulled out of some of these things. And I imagine if they pushed hard enough and they engineered their request right, they could probably get a lot of data that these places have.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And what I fear from this too is now that this has made some waves publicly, people are aware of that. Like everything else, we're going to have more copycat attackers using these techniques, right? And so we may see the potential impact spread. So I really hope that on the flip side too, this being publicly, talked about, even us talking about today, and Krebs doing his awesome story, maybe it forces the hand for what we're talking about. Let's go back and modify that EDR process. Make sure we're protecting people.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah, so talking to Lapsus, I think we're going to roll into that. I'm sure everybody heard about Lapsus over the last month. Before we do that, though, I see these comments about leaving the cheese a little unmelted, so you get a little little flavor crystal in there. I don't know. I can't really do the cold pizza roll in the middle. It always weirds me out for some reason when I think it's hot and I bite it, it's still cold. I'm more of like fry my mouth and always burn my tongue when I eat them.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Bryce on that. Where if you're not frying your mouth, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
I like to let them pop open. You let them explode a little bit, and then you dump some Parmesan in there, right? So
nice.
that, that's the way to go.
I've actually been too much work to me, but okay. I don't know about that.
I've actually been popping my pizza rolls in the deep fryer, and I don't know if you guys ever tried that, but they get extra crispy on the outside and extra lava hot in the middle, and that's fun, man. Dip them in a little ranch dressing. All right, so Lapsus. We're going to talk about another article which does associate with them. I'm sure you guys heard about Lapsus over the last month. A bunch of kids, from what I understand, they're like mostly 16 to 21-year-old, and they were able to successfully exploit Microsoft, Nvidia. We're going to talk about Nvidia, Okta. There was an account where I think even before this all went public for them, where they had stole 750 gigs of EA source code and made EA pay them a large sum of money to prevent from, and it was EA Sports specifically, from sharing that information. Vodafone, I think they targeted Apple, Uber, a bunch of folks in the past. And I think it was Lapsus related to. It was one of the members of Lapsus, right, Eric, that was selling those government accounts for $150. I may be wrong on that, but I believe
it was one of the members of Lapsus from. It was prior to that different group, but it was just last year that those posts were from, and Lapsus has specifically used this too further, right? So
So for what I know of Lapsus, a lot of their techniques are really low skill level. High having the nerve to do it level though, and social engineering campaigns. And from what I hear too, that a lot of native English speaking participants too. So they were incorporating voice phishing as well with American entities to, pose as these government agencies or so on that we're talking about. Also, the other thing that really, I'm sure you guys seen this, is they focused on like insider threat. They were targeting and recruiting people within organizations that could give them VDI access or VPN access into an environment, and then pay them a chunk of money to do that. That's something we don't talk about a lot, or we even see a lot right now, but it is a thing. And realistically too, proving insider threat in this situation, if you have an entity that gets paid to give up their VPN creds to someone, like, it's going to be really difficult to be able to prove that as well, right? Because what are they going to say? I don't know, my VPN got compromised. What can I do about that? And so some of those techniques I think they used to get to where they are today are really interesting. Not high tech skill level. I mean, it's really old school social engineering things that we've talked about before, and relying upon, insider threat.
Yeah, I always consider social engineering, in my head at least, to be thinking about tricking someone. And then I saw, in one of the articles I was reading about it, they were saying social engineering such as bribes, and I was like, I mean, I guess technically, yeah. I mean, not that I knew that bribing someone into doing something or paying someone to do something is new to me by any means, but I was just like, the idea that it's social engineering, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that I think we used to focus on a decent amount. I think there's still a little bit of focus on it, but I think some focus has fallen away with just all the other stuff, you know what I mean? But it's a good point too.
I mean, I know, like, for us when working cases, we generally have it in the back of our minds, right? Like, is this a possibility? Things aren't adding up, that kind of thing. But even still, like you're saying, like Oscar was saying there, proving that is insane, right? I mean, it's just it's so difficult to try and prove that, right? You've got to have a lot to prove that. As opposed
do you think it's easier? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say just to say, my account got compromised, whatever the case is.
Do you think it's easier to prove? I mean, if MFA is in place?
I mean, prove is the big word, right? I mean, if we're talking, kind of our standard of proof, maybe, but from a legal standard, probably not. If we've got MFA and you've got MFA logging, that kind of thing, right? You can see where the requests go, what phones are tied to it, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think it would be a lot easier to say, yeah, it looks like you did, you approved this, you hit the code.
It's still, though, I can throw a curveball in there. Well, number one, if MFA is implemented correctly, right, they're not using push notifications,
Right.
if they are using Authenticator,
Right,
so
right.
on. But the other thing, like if you see what Lapsus was doing, is they were targeting like Vodafone and SIM swapping. So they were able to get in and say, hey, give me Pinky's cell phone. This is part of an EDR. SIM swap that to my SIM, and then taking control of those devices. So that adds a whole new level of challenge there.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, more on like the legal side of it, because then you're going to get cell phone companies involved in that kind of thing. That's just beyond our scope. But yeah, that could get really difficult really fast.
Yeah, and we see that too, like in most of the cases. Like, I'm not saying that we've, I have worked insider threat cases in my past before, but they were primarily associated around theft rings, right? And these theft rings, it was a little easier to confirm like this is an insider threat when we proved they were offloading legit thousands and thousands of dollars of like technical equipment. And then we look into that person a little further and realize that they're completely a fake person. Like they do background checks and all this, and it's like, oh, this is not the entity they say they are. But never in this case, right? We always get to the point we can say, yeah, Joe Schmo's VPN was compromised here. But the business never says, let's go take the legal recourse and let's investigate Joe's personal life to see if we can get those court-ordered subpoenas to get access to his cell phone records and his communications and so on. I don't know if maybe this changes that in the future. Maybe companies are a little more suspicious. On the flip side too, people trust their employees. They build bonds, and that's how businesses are successful. And breaking that level of trust with someone just because you have a thought they may be an insider threat, it could be really detrimental to the culture of the business in general, right? People start hearing about that, like, oh man, my account got compromised. They court-ordered subpoenaed me and took over all my personal email to prove. So I had to prove to them that I wasn't an insider. So it's tricky waters, man, really tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fairly dangerous just all around, right? I mean, you got to do your best, but I totally agree that could change things. And that's why, like I'm saying, we often have it in the back of our minds that it's a possibility. But I mean, I can't think of any single time where we've ever even brought that to a client and said, "Hey, we think this might be insider" or anything like that. Just you need so much to go down that path.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, at least here in the United States, right? I think at least it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right? And we try to do a lot of things around that. So if we get to the place where we're saying, well, now prove to me it wasn't you, I mean, we're flipping that on its head, and we're really
for sure
fundamentally overthrowing a main principle. So
like fundamental rights violation to an extent there. So. But yeah, speaking of lapses, kind of going along that same, one of the stories that came out in the last month is we have an article on our Project Toffee threat feed. So a little blast and advertisement for that. I don't know if you guys are tuned into that, but if you're not, you should be. It's just projecttoffee.com. There's a threat link in there, and we have a lot of good information. A lot of stuff we talk about here actually is making it on there now. Just a way to get information out to you guys, and hopefully you find benefit there. But one of the stories is they were able to compromise. Well, they compromised Nvidia with a ransomware attack, but also during that attack, they stole 2 Nvidia code signing certificates. That's significant. I don't know. You guys want to tell them why that's significant?
I may let Eric jump in here if he wants to. I just wanted to give a quick shout to Corey for the awesome title of this article on our threat feed. So just forged signatures, not just for troubled youths anymore. I thought that was really great. So
yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if you wanted to jump in, Eric, or not. But
I'll jump in on 2 points now. I'll say that 1, according to the post, it was done by Kyle, not Corey.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. Good job, Kyle. I think the next one was Corey, and that was why I had that on my brain.
So much disrespect for Corey.
Shout out my boy, Corey. Kyle.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle. I'm sorry.
That said, it's a big deal when we're talking about malware and stuff, right? As someone who has to create malware all the time and try to get malware by things, one of the big things, there's a lot of environments which are doing it right, and they're making it so if something's not signed, it won't execute unless it's on like a list of things that they're allowing in the first place, right? Have an allow list in place and stuff like that. And so just having some level of signing in general is going to be useful to get certain malwares by, right? But then on top of it, if it's taken any further, or you have a certain limitation of certain ones, things like that, then having a more trusted signing certificate is even more useful. So if you can compromise someone's certificate, you can sign your malware with that, then people believe, oh, this is a normal, legit application from this company, and we can take advantage of that. And then when you look at things like Nvidia, who creates drivers that have to be pulled right into Windows and through Windows updates and things like that, and you realize that Microsoft and other platforms and stuff like that are going to have certain allowances in for places like Nvidia to make end user experience smoother and not so much of a complication, and doesn't scare people with a pop of, do you trust this, right? They kind of automatically trust these things. We start getting to that level of provider of an integral part of the system, it's even worse, right? Because now these things are just kind of automatically trusted by the system, right? When we get to that level of things. And so that's why it's such a big deal with NVIDIA. I mean, it's a big deal regardless if you steal someone's signing certificate, because you can have malware that looks like it's from you, but then with NVIDIA, at the level of integration that they have into the operating systems, it's even worse.
For sure. Yeah, it's so widespread. So many systems have NVIDIA. And on top of it too, like even folks that aren't familiar with the system they're running, right? Like normal users will say here, probably a lot of them don't know what video card or video drivers should be on their system, but they recognize the NVIDIA name, right? And they recognize that that's a good thing to do. So if you're embedding malware or malicious drivers and signing with that NVIDIA certificate now, like most folks are just going to overlook that and assume it's safe. These two certificates too, the things that I think I want to make sure everybody understands is the initial thought, like when we read this, is like, oh, why can't they just revoke the CAs, right? Why can't they just revoke those? But Microsoft has functionality built in that after a certificate is expired, right, that those can't be revoked after they expire, right? And then also Microsoft has functionality built in so that when driver certificates expire, they don't essentially disable those drivers from operating or disable that validation, because that would break your operating system. So they have to allow those to persist even after the expiration date. So this is a really smart move to get two expired certificates, because they can embed those in their malware. The CAs can't be revoked, and they're going to continue to operate forever, right? So there's no way to clean those up now because they're embedded in so many legit drivers that are operating on computers today.
Yeah, and there were some mitigations, right, in the articles we're looking at. They're not overly straightforward, though. I mean, I know it kind of they kind of frame it as, oh yeah, just tell Windows Defender to block those certs, but it's not as straightforward as that. And they were really only talking about Windows Defender, so if you're using something else, maybe it's got a different path there. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when we're looking at potential malware, if it's signed, it gets a lot less scrutiny than if it's an unsigned application. I mean, just even that little bit right there is huge. But then, yeah, trying to mitigate this is going to be troublesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
The problem you get if you try, and I've seen that recommendation just to create a deny policy for those certificates, right? But what about the valid drivers that are still using those certificates, right? So if you implement that and you have those valid drivers in use in your environment using those certs, well, you just broke, if you're in a large environment and you have, gold standard laptops that are issued that all are using those today, you just broke a 1,000 users device, and good luck IT department cleaning that up,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you'd have to definitely push updates so that they're using new ones, right, beforehand and stuff like that. And obviously you're going to have misses and you're going to have problems, and help desk could be crazy, but I mean, obviously you got to do something about it. I do have a question. I haven't looked into this, so this is a question, and I haven't told you about this question, so feel free to be like, we don't know. But I know that there are some AVs, EDRs, things like that do have their own kind of deny list on certain certs, right? Have you seen other people push it? I'll give an example. We had a code signing cert for our malware we had purchased, to use, and it got blocked. And anything we signed with that cert at some point just was like, well, that's blocked, that's cert, if we try to use it, right? It's happened to us in the past. Have you guys heard anything about that? Anybody implementing these directly into their solutions? I mean, outside of like Defender having options to put it in itself.
So far, I haven't. I mean, it's not to say that it's not there, right? I mean, some of the ones that we use and run into, right? They may have not made an announcement about it, kind of thing. Some of that stuff gets added in, and we just see it get blocked. But so far, yeah, I've not seen anyone doing it. But you make a really good point there. I bet a lot of folks are.
That's a really good question. It's funny. I looked at my notes when you asked that, because my note said, I know Windows Defender can block certs. I hope the other endpoint solutions can or will do the same soon.
Yeah.
So
I want to say we've seen them call out, like, I mean, I'm not going to use any names, but some of the ones that we've used, I'm pretty sure I've seen them call out, hey, this is a known bad cert or something like that before, but maybe not always blocking it either. So, a lot of these don't default to block unless it's unsigned and things like that, like we were talking about. So probably for the exact reasons, we were talking about here with breaking drivers and that kind of thing. So
yeah, I mean, they might be less like, I know with our quote signing cert at the time that we got ours deny listed or whatever you want to call it, right, blocked. I do know that I could have taken literally any application, signed it with that cert, and it would have flagged as malware at that point once it got to that list, right? But they're going to be less likely or less inclined to do that with something that actually has legitimate uses still out in the world with that. So yeah.
I will say too, in the notes we send out to everybody, just so everybody's aware, we've got the serial numbers of those certs. We'll put those in there. There's a link for some YAR scanning. I'll include the link for the YAR signatures as well, so you guys have that. Also, just want to mention too, like, this isn't new. We've seen this before, and like hacker history for everybody. Like, this was a key piece to Stuxnet. And so for anybody on the call that's not familiar with Stuxnet, and I don't remember the entity they targeted, but they were stolen certificates, right? They used those certificates to be able to get their malware in. I'll share that link to the Stuxnet story for folks on the call who may not be familiar with it, and you should read it. It's pretty awesome.
I think it was Komodo, wasn't it? Wasn't it the big one back in the day? Maybe not.
Yeah, I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have, since I was going to plug Stuxnet, and that came to mind. Looked at that and told you guys who was targeted there. But yeah,
I remember it was
stolen certificates used in that attack chain.
I remember it was less sophisticated than you would think to get that done. And I was telling the guys a while back, I used to do a lot of cert renewals for place that I used to work, and I was really surprised at how easy it was to renew certs back in the day. You did not need as much information as you would think you do. It's a lot better now. I'll say that they've tightened it up a lot, but I had a couple times where I basically just said, hey, I need this cert renewed. Gave them the CSR, the little block of stuff there, and was good to go. But I mean, if you had access to that server, you didn't really have to prove who you were or anything like that. If you could just get that CSR, you were golden.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of validation back in the day. I remember that as well.
I do want to real tech certs here.
Comment on a thing like here. I think this is good for us to chat about quickly. I know Rob and Bryce, you guys had a couple comments in here saying automatic updates would make it worse, and then look at SolarWinds. Like, I want to hit SolarWinds again just quickly because I still, even though the SolarWinds thing happened because of an update, if you ask me, should I be auto updating my SolarWinds software? I would say 1000% yes, you should. The problem there was the improper implementation of SolarWinds. Your SolarWinds device should not be able to talk to the internet in an untethered way. If your SolarWinds device couldn't have talked to the internet, even though malware was deployed on that box, the attacker couldn't access that malware. It was essentially a backdoor that was deployed. So if you prevented your critical infrastructure from communicating with public networks, it was negated. So I would still say apply those patches. I mean, I wouldn't say that should change your patching policy in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Agree? Or
no, I mean, I do agree, particularly with SolarWinds, right? I mean, I know there may be other cases that we need to look at, but just specifically with that one, one, and the one recently, the RMM tool that was CISA. I think it was another good example of poor configurations and that kind of thing. So
when SolarWinds first happened and we were discussing it, we had our Hackle Box right after that. Remember one of the things we said too was like, I mean, think about it, they're probably even being more diligent than ever right now. So right. I mean, yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I see JT noted real tech certs. That sounds right for the Stuxnet.
Yeah, I just had searched it too. It was apparently J Micron and Realtek who were located in the same business complex.
Yeah.
So like a physical access thing or something. I don't know, but
interesting.
I don't know a lot about Stuxnet as far as that part goes. So yeah.
Cool. Moving on then. I think next thing on the list here is Sophos for firewalls require an urgent new flame shield. That was Corey's.
That was Corey's. Yeah, that was Corey's. Yeah, I just mixed them up. My bad.
Yeah.
My bad, guys.
So there's a critical CVE came out recently affecting Sophos devices. From what I understand, it's 18.5 MR3 and earlier. that would allow an attacker to bypass user authentication via the firewall's user portal or the web admin interface, giving them the ability to execute arbitrary code. It was a 9.8 out of 10. From what I understand, I did research this, Eric. I'll yield to you to see if you found any details on this. I found there was a very similar vulnerability that was also disclosed for Zixel devices, that's CYXEL devices. It was also a critical. It sounded like they were very similar. I know in that one I could confirm it was lack of proper access control in the CGI, but I didn't actually confirm with the Sophos one if it was the same. Was it access control in CGI? Was it something else? I didn't find the exploit either. I don't know if you found that.
Yeah, I didn't find it off, first kind of glance getting set up for this and this stuff. I definitely plan to look into it more, but I couldn't say right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so on this one, I mean, not a lot to talk about, just for your awareness. If you're running those devices, either Sophos devices or the Zixel devices, make sure you patch. I know that Sophos does offer enable automatic hotfix deployment. So if you have a Sophos device, you can turn that on. The Sophos device will actually check for a hotfix every 30 minutes and auto apply that. So when things like this break, you can remediate quicker. But the big thing is like, why in the hell do you have your user portal open to the internet anyway?
Well, so I was thinking about that, right? Is it maybe the VPN portal, right? Like it's an SSL VPN or something like that kind of thing?
It's possibly I didn't see specifically it was a VPN module, and typically those modules will have their own logon interface. This was the web admin was one. There's no way you should have that web admin portal available on the internet, so shut that down.
No, admin definitely. Yeah, I just wasn't sure on the user one what they were doing with that. Like, what kind of user functionality was there that might need to be available, but even still.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's users of the product on our call today. If you guys know, like maybe let us know in the chat so we can give us a little bit of education today. That would be good. My default is though, obviously if you don't need it on the internet, don't put it on the internet. If you're serving VPN, that's a different story. But I didn't see any mention of the VPN, maybe a thing too. I know with like the FortiGate stuff, those vulnerabilities that came out in 2018, right? That affected the web login and the VPN as well. So that one was a little tricky for folks to remediate. And believe it or not, that one's still being exploited right now. There's still vulnerable devices. So yeah, listen to our PSA, take those things down if you don't need them, and patch. Spring4Shell.
Spring4Shell. I had $1 for every time I saw that name on the internet in the last few weeks.
I know, right? Yeah.
I think I first started seeing it posted, a couple weeks ago, something like that, the 30th, 31st, something like that. And I just remember like between Twitter and like the NetSec Reddit subreddit, which I'll go to a decent amount like every day. I was just like, there would be so many posts on it, and there was just like, there's a lot, right? There's a lot of people talking about it, and I go through and look into it a little bit, and it seemed like there'd be, the subreddit, for example, right? Like within one day, there'd be 16 things or something like that posted about it, all basically saying the same thing. And then everybody commenting on it being like, this is not that big of a deal. And so you have these like extremes of everybody just being like, this is huge. And then a bunch of people being like, no, it's not. And trying to really sort through it and be like, okay, how big is it? How big of a deal is it? Right. But
I think the media machine wanted it to be a big deal. They want them all about that click count, baby. And so they were thinking this is going to be another Log4j, or they wanted to project it was going to be another Log4j, but turns out it wasn't. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, the prevalence of Spring Core and Spring Cloud and all that, whatever, like it is heavily out there, like Log4j, right? Or so I get it. But the amount of the configuration that's required to make it actually a reality, the kind of setup someone has to have is more specific, right? So it's not going to be as that said, I mean, not to say when we say a big deal, we're talking about like people blowing it up to like Log4j status. It's definitely still an issue. It's definitely still a critical vulnerability, and if things are set up that way to use that type of configuration and then the underlying infrastructure, then it's an issue for sure. It's you don't want to have it. It's going to be bad. But yeah, for sure. Not trying to downplay the severity at all, just maybe making sure people understand like the number of affected assets throughout the world is significantly lower than what we've seen in Log4j.
And like what was interesting here too is like the first thing I read and we see this is like, oh, if it's deployed in its default mode, it's not vulnerable, right? So there's a specific configuration that has to be changed before it's vulnerable. And so to me, that was kind of the first indicator, like, oh, I mean, sorry, developers, if you're on here, like, but developers are lazy, bro. If it works in default mode, they're going to roll in default mode. So,
I mean,
yeah.
to be fair, as all of us are ex-IT guys too, we probably would, we're going to deploy default mode if it works too. So, I mean, it's not just developers,
I'm sorry. I don't mean that. That was just a funny joke. I think everybody, I'm just being fun here. I love you, developers.
I will say, like, initial reports, I know the first and second day or so, I was trying to follow to see, is anyone actually seeing active exploitation of this, right? And I couldn't find anyone that was saying they were in a, the best I would see is someone saying it seems like it's limited exploitation if there is something that we're seeing. That was initially, right? It seemed like I saw a lot of reports, which is like, well, you got to be using, Spring Core, whatever, MVC applications on Tomcat with Java 9 or later, and you have to have whatever binding is set up to make it so that post bodies are processed. And it was just like, okay, that sounds like a lot, but 9.0 Java, that's common enough. Even though there's a lot of people who are not. Tomcats are very common, right? Like, so I could see some situations. I do think that the configuration, though, just because there's a lot of different situations, are more limited. That said, some people have come out and said, hey, we do have some vulnerable products, right? And now the CISA, CISA is saying, hey, we are seeing evidence of active exploitation. I'm curious if part of that is from how massively it got blown up in the media about how bad this thing was, and so people quickly started scanning very in depth for it. But nonetheless, it is actively in exploitation now.
Yeah, but I mean, just talking about the media machine thing. One of the first articles I saw was like, 1/5 of all firms on the planet have been targeted by this. And I read that, and it was kind of like, targeted, sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
exploited, almost certainly not, right? And so yeah. I'm with you. I think there was a lot of hype, and then again, like you said, not trying to downplay the severity. It's obviously a problem, but
I seen a number that said 37,000 attacks were tracked. That's attacks, which to me, like, that could be scanning, and like, sure, every time there's a new exploitable vulnerability, and there's a POC for that exploit, like, everything's going to be scanned. Period.
Yeah.
And so to me, that number didn't mean a lot.
Yeah, a lot of the quotes I'm seeing, both in this article and other places, they all seem to be around. And again, not downplaying the severity of the thing, and it is actively in exploitation when it's being found. But a lot of the quotes I'm seeing are more about, like, security scorecard, Akamai, Palo Alto, right? All these things saying we're seeing scanning for this, like lots of scanning for this. So obviously, if you have a setup that's vulnerable to it, it's probably going to get found. Lots of scanning is being performed.
Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I was looking around for details on the actual exploit. It seemed pretty fuzzy to me. I didn't see a whole lot out there that was real definitive on that. Did you guys find anything when you were digging around for how the exploit actually works, if there's a POC or something?
Yeah, I did find some.
Okay.
I not prepared to go into detail about it right now, but I definitely did find multiple POCs for it. Yes.
Yeah, okay, I did see the POC was public. It got dropped on a Git, and then I think Git pulled it back down, similar to what we saw with Proxy Shell last year. All right, so we debated that a little bit.
I could say within 24 hours, I found 4 or 5 different POCs on GitHub.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, I would say too. I mean, just some thoughts on that too. I mean, just as far as, I mean, I know we're not saying it's definitely like Log4j, because it's definitely not as widespread, right? But if you were vulnerable, probably take some of the same steps, right? Look for shells, look for anything, do some threat hunting. If you were vulnerable for any period of time, just be aware that you could have been exploited. But doesn't seem widespread
for sure.
at the moment.
And I'll run through like the products that we know that were affected, kind of COTS products like Cisco Crosswork, Cisco Edge Intelligence, VMware Tanzu, it was Tanzu Application Service, Operations Manager, and the TKGI, Atlassian Connect, Spring Boot, SAP possibly. I haven't seen confirmation on that. There were some Red Hat tools as well, and I've seen the list of the Red Hat tools that were affected: Decision Maker, JBoss, Process Automation and Virtualization. And then possibly, this hasn't been confirmed, but possibly NetApp, Micro Focus, some SolarWinds products, and Flexer. So again, if that SolarWinds product is affected, that's why you should apply those patches. I don't know if it is or not, but yeah. All right, cool.
AT in chat just said THM, I'm assuming try hack me, actually just released a room on it too. Is that what was that recent enough for about this? Yeah. So that'd be cool if anyone wants to just test out the exploit path. We have people listening.
Yeah, very cool.
Doing that. So
yeah, thanks for sharing that, JT. Cool. I think that's about everything. Did you guys have anything else you want to share? Any tips? Or I could say one, like the phishing report, maybe Pink, if we want to talk about this just for a second, is, you know, last month, almost said week, I always say the hacker tip of the week, and that's wrong. But you know, we talked about the conflict, the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and the implications it may have here, right? It's been pretty quiet, right? We've seen a downtick in activity, which
very quiet.
Yeah, scares me a little bit too. See how that plays out. Give you guys one update too. I didn't make some progress, and I'm talking about our securing our critical infrastructure initiative that I'm pushing. I've got the framework drafted and all that. I actually had the chance to meet with some of our listeners this week and review that, and I kicked it over to them. And so going to be meeting with some other folks in electric and water specifically is who I'm targeting right now. So if anybody on the call has folks that may be interested, send them my way. I'd be happy to talk to them. I'm looking for peer feedback here, and then we'll be ramping that out to the public hopefully in the next month or so.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm glad that's happening. So
heck yeah. Well, that's all I got. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your Friday. Get rolling on that weekend, get some relaxing time, and we'll see everyone again next month. Thank you guys for joining.
Good.
Enjoy some pizza bites. Pizza
Oh yeah, some calzone bites, calzone nuggets.
Roll up a pizza. Petition your local. Was it Domino's? Who was it? Petition your local whatever pizza place.
Little Caesars
to get me back the Batman thing, because apparently I missed it.
Calzone is a sandwich.
Is it a sandwich or a burrito? We don't have time for this. You guys have
I see another one here about fajitas and tacos from Michael. I mean, we have to do a special session. I'm not sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Maybe we'll do that. We'll debate all these things. It'll be a special non-technical edition of the Hackle Box where we dive into all those food issues that matter. Cereal, soup. This is great. I
can confirm that cereal is soup. No, actually, apparently it's not. It doesn't have all the different things that soup needs to have. Sorry, it's not.
And before I go, Bryce, I do see your question about security scorecards. That's a good idea. We can unpack that in a future episode. We'll see how busy the topic is, the agenda is for next month, but we'll definitely put that on the future for you. All right. Peace. That's enough. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.